We're back here on the Frenzy Fantasy Sports Radio Network. Jake Seeley, Matt Modica. Do we have Tracy here, Don? I know you're trying to talk to me.
Hey, guys.
Okay. So it sounds like his audio is going in and out too, but it sounds like we have the audio, but not the video quite yet of Tracy. So let's try to go to Tracy because,
let's do it.
Tracy Hankin, Inside Injuries, what's happening?
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
We're doing really well, Tracy. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Awesome. So let's get right into it, right? The big story from yesterday was Antonio Brown and what was called initially a calf contusion that we all realized wasn't quite a contusion when they sent him to the hospital with a bruise. What's going on with Antonio Brown?
Yeah, so Antonio Brown, as you now know, many of us have seen replayed 1,000 times this morning, has suffered from being sandwiched between a couple of defenders in the end zone last night. He kind of landed awkwardly and then twisted around that calf muscle. They have now confirmed that it's a partially torn calf muscle. The reason that he likely went to the hospital, although the team has not confirmed this yet, is because in that type of situation, when the player is claiming that there's a lot of pain in that area, you worry about potential fracture, you worry about internal bleeding. Things such as compartment syndrome can happen where the internal bleeding causes pain because you're getting quite a bit of pressure and buildup in that area. So likely the hospital visit was precautionary because he seems to have been cleared from any more serious injury, and it seems to be what we suspected in the beginning, which is a partially torn calf muscle. Unfortunately for fantasy folks, that's going to keep him out of the fantasy playoffs. But as long as he rests and rehabs, then he should be back between 3 and 4 weeks for the team's playoff run.
So 3 to 4 weeks, Matt, whether they get the bye or not, it sounds like he'll be good to go either way.
Yeah, no, you definitely want to see him in the playoffs. You want to see him versus Jacksonville or New England, one of those key matchups if it turns out to be that way. So at least he could come back for the NFL playoffs.
Well, which is obviously huge. Getting Antonio Brown back for the regular playoffs is big. But if you get Antonio Brown, Week 16, your fantasy playoffs, the guy that we said should be 1-1 next year, devastating. Absolutely devastating.
I'm devastated. I mean, I was watching that. I had dreams of the 100K, and that's probably going to be dead.
Those dreams just got popped.
Yeah, it's one of the best players, as you said. 1-1, 1-2. Yeah. So it's unfortunate in that aspect.
Antonio Brown wasn't the only wide receiver to go down yesterday, Tracy's. Devontae Adams got popped with another concussion, a blindsided hit again, his second concussion of the season. He's third in the last 2 seasons. How bad is this particular concussion?
Yeah, it's hard to tell right now, but as you said, his third concussion in the last 2 seasons, which leads us to believe that they are going to treat him with extreme caution. So we'll have to wait and see how he progresses through the protocol, when he's even allowed to come back to the facility to have team meetings, and then, of course, sort of progress on to things like walkthroughs. We're anticipating that they're going to be extremely cautious, though, given his history. So, again, for fantasy owners, if you were counting on him, you got to look for an alternative. For the Packers, if they can hold in there and hope for some other teams to help him out, then maybe he'll be back in about 3 weeks is our best guess based on what we know right now.
So 3 weeks, would, much like Antonio Brown, would cost him the rest of the fantasy season as well, even if you play into Week 17, which you shouldn't. But
yeah, so Adams, Brown, 2 guys that were really,
wide receiver ones.
Yeah, they were killing it this season. This would be. Now let's stay with the wide receivers. Keenan Allen. Saturday night we kind of all forgot about it.
Yeah,
it was kind of off our radar yesterday. We were so into the slate yesterday, and I got the text message this morning from one of my partners in a game we were going into the championship, and we have Keenan Allen. Should we expect to be playing him?
I think you got to be really careful with Keenan Allen. They haven't said a lot about the nature of the back injury, but based on the data that we do have and how our algorithm is looking at the risk analysis related to that, plus all of his injury data from the past, we're going to exercise extreme caution, and we would advise fantasy players, again, if you're in the playoffs for your fantasy leagues, you probably need to look elsewhere for an alternative, because we think the minimum optimal recovery time for him is going to be 3 weeks.
What is wrong with Keenan Allen? I haven't even heard what's wrong with him yet, Tracy.
We know it was a back injury, and but we don't know how severe the back injury was. We are anticipating they're going to come out, and with the data that they release probably today, tomorrow, possibly the next day, we are anticipating that it's going to be either a grade 1 or grade 2 back injury. They were probably exercising caution in terms of carting him off the field. But again, we'll know more in the next couple of days.
As we said, Keenan Allen was smiling and waving on the cart as he got carted off back to the locker room. Listen, the Chargers are still in this thing. So unlike Devontae Adams, where the Packers may be out pending tonight, and unlike Antonio Brown, where things are kind of locked up and they can't really force him back, Keenan Allen may push himself to play. But Tracy says, listen, as a fantasy owner, you don't want to push him given his injury history. If you're a Keenan Allen owner and he's active on Sunday, are you going to play him, Matt?
I don't know. I need time to mull this one over. I think, I'm probably going to see if I have a better option. I know my partner hates Golden Tate now and all the texts that he sent me on that, but I might have to go Golden Tate against that Bengals team that gave up.
Yeah, it's a good point. The Bengals, having given up, obviously make like a good play. We're talking to Tracy Hankin, inside injuries, and yet there was another wide receiver that got hurt this weekend, and that was someone that's been really good. Maybe not that Antonio Brown, Devontae Adams level, but Marquise Lee, on a season where the Jacksonville Jaguars have really surprised, has taken over the number 1 wide receiver role for the Jaguars with Allen Robinson going down. And yet it was yesterday where Lee went down. How serious is Lee's ankle injury?
We, again, just overnight, we haven't gotten a lot of new data on his injury, but he's one of those guys where we expect that, given how important that ankle is to pushing off, cutting on your routes, for any type of ankle or lower extremity issue on a wide receiver, you've got a lot of sensitivity. So again, in this case, we're going to exercise extreme caution related to playing him in the fantasy playoffs. For those folks who are left in, we would really, really urge you guys to look for alternatives. For the crazy fans, we're hoping that he, can come back with an optimal recovery time of somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 weeks. But again, with his injury, we will likely have a lot more data today and tomorrow, and we'd be able to give a better optimal recovery time.
And this is a little bit different, Matt, because the Jaguars, who are going to make the playoffs, and they're most likely not going to get that bye, they need Marquise Lee healthy for that. Given the team that they play this week in the Niners, they very well could rest him, which, if you're desperate here, facing the Niners, this is a situation you could look to with a Keelan Cole. I don't know if D.D. Westbrook's out there, but Keelan Cole basically could be someone you want to pick up.
Keelan Cole would be the guy for me if I have to go pick up one of these.
And Allen Hurns could be back, too.
Yeah, and if Hurns comes back, Hurns is, proven to be a guy that can get the ball in the end zone. So there's that. But I want to go to the running back situation, and I want to double dip. My boy Rex Burkhead went down, and I was not happy about that. But more importantly, for the fantasy landscape, big Leonard Fournette. What can we expect about Fournette? Is he a guy that could be in our lineups for the championship game?
I'll tell you. So Leonard Fournette, we've talked about him a couple of times now over the course of the last week. Again, a reminder to the folks who haven't heard, he has suffered from lower extremity issues on again, off again throughout the years, even going back to college days and especially his time at LSU, where he had quite a few ankle issues that he dealt with. So with Leonard Fournette, we as, sort of looking at the injury history and the risk profile for Leonard Fournette, ideally we would tell people to rest him for 3 to 4 weeks and don't count on any real production from him over that course of time. The team, however, has come out and said he's going to play next week. So they feel that he is progressing along well enough that they can count on him next week. So I think it depends on your specific situation from a fantasy perspective in terms of whether or not you really need him out there, what your alternatives are. We would still express caution, though, and ideally, you'd give him another, I'll say, 3 weeks. at a minimum to rest up.
It seems to be the key here, 3 weeks, and there's just no way the Jaguars are going to give him 3 weeks to rest up with the playoffs here, with the way Chris Ivory looked yesterday. That's not going to happen. Rex Burkhead, on the other hand, will he be back for the playoffs, Tracy?
I don't think he's going to be back for the fantasy playoffs, but I do think he'll be back for the Patriots run. The great news related to Rex Burkhead is that he did avoid an ACL injury and any more serious knee-related injury. It seems that it's likely an MCL sprain. That's what we've gotten so far from the data that we've collected. Now, you're not going to like what I have to say, but ideally, this injury, his position, you'd give him 4 weeks to rest before he comes back and can kind of be counted on for his regular production. The team may be able to give him a couple weeks. I'm not sure they'll be able to stretch him to 4.
And I think that's okay with the playoffs on the horizon. Patriots going to get that bye. I think they're the one team that actually can give him exactly the 4 weeks that he needs to get him ready to go for that first week of the playoffs. We take a break, and when we come back here on the Fantasy Football Frenzy, Jake Seeley rejoins the program. Thank you so much, Tracy. We'll talk to you on Thursday on the Roto Express. Matt Modica, Greg Sussman filling in for Corey Parson. Fantasy Football Frenzy rolls on. Goon Hour here next.